You're listening to the Vint Podcast, where we bring you interviews and stories from around the world of wine and spirits. From winemakers and critics to sommeliers and master distillers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping the future of today's food and drinks culture. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vint Podcast presented by Coravin. Coravin is the world leader in at-home wine preservation, allowing you to pour a glass of your favorite wine and enjoy more bottles from your cellar without having to pop the cork. And this week, we're excited to announce that we have a winner of our Coravin Timeless giveaway. We've randomly selected Susan from Virginia, who's an avid listener and super excited to drink more wine without wasting what's left in the bottle. We'll reach out soon to make sure you get your Coravin in no time. Thanks to everyone who connected with us on Instagram and reached out. It was a lot of fun reading what you guys were drinking and getting to connect with more listeners. And without further ado, I'm joined in studio by your latest Master of Wine candidate, Billy Galanko. How you doing, Billy?
Very, very well. Yeah, last week was a big week for me. I had my birthday on Tuesday and got accepted into the MW program on Wednesday. So it was a great past week for me.
The third to final step, right? Get accepted, pass theory, pass tasting, paper. Is that how it goes?
There's a little bit more involved. I was actually just talking to Adam on our MW on our team about the process recently. There is basically, you take pre-exams to pre-qualify you in order to take the exams. So I'll be doing multiple seminars or in-person seminars each year. You can travel. There's one in the first one this time will be either in Napa, Austria, or Australia. You have the option to go to any of them. I'll probably go to the Napa one first. I definitely want to do a couple in Europe. They basically help you gain a sense of, number one, networking, but then what's going to be asked of you. And then the next year, I'll be sitting down for a paper, and it's basically training to prepare you for the actual exams. Adam had been saying when he was doing it 10, 15 years ago, there was very little guidance. So sometimes people would just sit down to papers and have no idea what they were expected to do. If they passed, they got no feedback. So over the years, they've tried to make it a little bit more structured and really prepare folks for the exams. And then if you pass the two exams, then you get to do the research paper where, again, just Amanda Barnes had mentioned in her episode, you have to submit a topic, they have to approve the topic, and then you knock it out.
Nice. Yeah, it's a pretty long trek just to get to this point, but it sounds, will it be 4 more years?
Yep. 3 years is the fastest you can do it. I was excited because my wife is starting her MBA program. So I told Adam, I was like, yeah, we'll both be finished in 3 years. And he said, if you're lucky, we will see. But I'm hoping to be efficient with it. Fingers crossed. And now I got to start, I'm always reading wine books, but I guess I'm going to try to find some tasting groups and really amp up that side of things to make sure I'm top of my game in the next few years.
Yeah, because you feel like probably the part that takes the longest to drill down on is tasting and that more experiential portion versus just cram a bunch of books, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think the final paper or the tasting exam, I think is 24 wines. The practice one next year, I think is just 12. But yeah, it's wines from all over the world, all different styles. Whereas part of the diploma, there's a lot of essay writing and a lot of details that you need to know. They always say it's a good stepping stone to the MW program. So I'm not as worried about the writing and theory component, but just being able to taste broadly. And then it's all quality levels. You could have on an exam a wine that's very, low, poor quality. Then you'd have to identify that and label it as simple. And you could have a wine that's literally like a first growth Bordeaux or Grand Cru Burgundy. And you need to make sure you identify that properly as well. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of tasting of all different types of wines. So that'll be fun.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. Hopefully they'll throw a few pet nats on there for you. And
I was speaking of that, little side tangent. You remember piquettes were all the rage about a year and a half ago. And I feel like that has really died out a little bit. I was listening to my history of wine book, which I'm actually almost done with now. And they brought up piquettes again. And I was like, that was a fun time.
You feel like people are off that kind of stuff? And how do you judge that? Is it what they're serving at wine bars in New York and LA? Is that how we know?
Yeah, I guess I'm judging by what I'm seeing and seeing people talk about. But in Los Angeles, at least, our natural wine bars, the wine shops that I go to on a regular basis, at one point there was like 3 or 4 piquettes around. And again, for people who may not have been listening to us back then, piquettes are basically wine-like products that are basically after a wine is pressed off the skins, You'll take the skins, put that back in a tank, put some water in there, and put a sweetening agent. Could be, some people use honey, some people just use sugar, something else. And then you pour more yeast in, then it re-ferments, and it is like a wine light. It basically takes a little bit of extra flavor from what's left in the skins and produces a wine beverage. This used to be made for like vineyard workers and people way back in the day, considered more of a second tier quality wine. I think they're really great. They're like really light pet nats, but I just haven't seen as many. So I been meaning to bring that up for us.
Yeah, light can be bubbly, right? As well.
Yeah, mostly bubbly. Yeah, it's typically bottled when it's still fermenting. But yeah, on another note of fun wines that I want to talk about, I was able to have a number of things over the weekend, and a couple of them are producers we actually sell a lot of on the marketplace or we've had on. So I did have a Ponceau. I had a Bourgogne Blanc. I can't remember the exact, I can't ever pronounce exactly what the bottling is called. It's the Cuvée de Paris 2019. And that was a really interesting expression because we had that next to a Bruno Lorenzen Blanc, which is from Mercury, is where Bruno Lorenzen is. And he's one of the producers that we actually sell a lot of on the marketplace. And it was really cool to juxtapose the Ponceau wine, which was generally Burgundy appellated, which was really ripe and a really full-bodied expression very like minimal oak expression of Chardonnay, which next to the Bruno Lorenzen was a Mercury, very more traditional Burgundy, had new French oak on it. And it was really, really a quality wine. It was like under $40 when I purchased it. And we have other wines on our website, a whole range of his that are great bargains. Definitely recommend people check out Bruno Lorenzen's white wines. It's really cool.
You did this at your sort of birthday gathering tasting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had people over to sit and have to listen to me talk about wine. We also had, I'll go to the sparkling first. We had a Famille Moussé wine, which is a small grower champagne based in the Marne, on the Vallée de Marne in Champagne. For those who are kind of champagne heads, you already know this, but the Marne Valley is known primarily for Pinot Meunier, or Meunier, as it's just known now, because it's not part of the Pinot family. And it was really interesting because I found it in the Ray Isle book. His book, it was talking about just different producers throughout Champagne, and they really emphasized how this producer, one, is leading part of that charge of bringing Meunier back to the forefront. And for those who read the Vint Marketplace weekly news, we had an article recently highlighting how Meunier is making a big comeback. It's been top of mind. Ray highlighted these producers as one of the people who are on the forefront of that. And so it was really cool. The thing that they also do making it that I really like was like a perpetual cuvee. So it's like a Solera in sherry, whereas starting in, I think, the early 2000s and it went through 2019, they would put wine in each vintage, take some wine out, put some wine in. So it was like just like a base blend rather than blending different lots from different years. So that was 50% of the cuvee. So that was a really cool expression. And it was the Eugene bottling that we had.
Oh, very cool. Can you find Meunier? Like, where can you find it outside of Champagne?
It's not widely planted, mainly because it had a lesser reputation for a while. I've actually seen a couple planted now in not Los Angeles, California in general. But I think it's getting a little bit more out there, but I think it's very, very minimal plantings. Something that Ray mentioned in the book, I thought was really interesting is that Meunier got this negative reputation because for a long time, I think after World War II especially, Champagne was planting for volume, not necessarily for quality. They basically, with all the modern technology that they were able to put in sprays and stuff, they were able to really start pumping out more wine from the vineyards than they had historically been able to. And Meunier is just not, like, the vine itself does not produce quality fruit at volume. So everybody has found once they start reining back the volumes, they start making more of these conscious wines with limited yields, that the wines are just starting to really shine. And I think that's starting to spread. And I think that's partly why you're seeing Meunier planted further afield as well.
Yeah, I wonder if we start seeing that in the U.S. You mentioned maybe Sonoma. I'm just trying to think of where else they're growing.
Yeah, no, I actually
Oregon, maybe.
There. Definitely, I meant California. I've definitely seen some in Oregon. Anywhere where they're trying to make a champagne-like wine.
Sure.
I've definitely seen a little bit in Oregon, seen a little bit in California, and definitely not in LA. But I think you're going to see it more and more places that you go.
Very cool.
And then to wrap up here, we had two reds from Burgundy, and one was a Sylvain Bataille his Marsanne, just generic Village Marsanne, which was really cool. He also makes some single vineyard wines. Always a big Sylvain Bataille fan. And then we also had an Henri Boileau, Bourgogne Rouge, which was really cool. We sell a bunch of Boileau on the website. We should sell more Bataille. I think people should be drinking more Bataille because he's amazing. He also makes wine for a lot of other top wineries outside of his own Marsanne stuff. But what's cool is the Marsanne was really light, elegant, and aromatic, which Marsanne is up in the north next to Gevrey-Chambertin, the village. And it's cool because you would think it would be just as structured as Gevrey-Chambertin because it's not too far away, but this is a very light, more floral expression, whereas the Boileau was really full-bodied, rich, a really rich expression of Pinot Noir. So I thought that was a really fun juxtaposition to have next to each other. Just very similar to how the Ponceau was way riper and made in a stainless way compared to the Brunello Lorenz, and that was oaky and a little bit more lean and minerally.
What was the feedback from folks in attendance?
They enjoyed them. Some of them were wine people. One guy used to be a GM at restaurants, so he very much enjoyed all of them. We had another friend who typically tastes with the guy who's the GM, and he is used to having one or two good bottles that we show him at a time, not really being able to compare wines next to each other, and he really found that enjoyable. And the rest of the group just really enjoyed them. But the piece de resistance was I have it here, if you can see it on the YouTube, was nice. Yeah, I had a 1989 Figeac from my birth year. It's a really pretty bottle, so I'm just going to keep it. But the fun part about it is, so a lot of people have birth year wines. For me, it's like and then whenever you think about a vintage wine too, people always talk about how many years it is. But say it just turns to be January, and you say this wine is X, one more year older. Technically, it was only harvested 3 or 4 months before. So my birth year wine, this Figeac, was actually the second earliest harvest I think I read at the time in the past 100 years. And they started harvest on September 11th, and it went a little bit into the 20s. But it's cool because I was born on the 10th. So basically this wine was technically, if you count the day the grapes are crushed as being born for the wine, it was basically born literally the day after me. So it was cool that the wine was exactly my age. So that was really fun. I got a big kick out of that. And apparently when it was a really warm year, which is why it was harvested so early, it didn't really show well out of the gates. It didn't get great reviews. And I was looking at it, and then Neil Martin went back and reviewed it 6 years ago. I think it was 2019, 2018. And he said it had undergone a Damascene. You might get this reference because it's more biblical, but a Damascene transformation. Basically, he was saying it's amazing now. He said he poo-pooed it when it first came out, and it was really showing well. So I was hoping it was still holding on, and it definitely was. It had a lot of really character of the Cab Franc. You got a lot of those pyrazines, but there's minerality, leather, cocoa, some coffee notes. And as it opened up, it was really great. Tannins were nice and soft, obviously, because it's old, but it was still very lively, great acid, definitely some dried fruit in there, a little bit of aromatics. I was pleased. It was a good deal for the bucks, I would say.
Nice. Yeah, it's always you go on wine forums and stuff, and the people who sort of float in and out, you see that question all the time. Oh, my birth year is X. What should I get? And it's always funny when people have quote unquote bad birth years. Mine's not that great. 96 wasn't super strong in a lot of places. I think it was okay in Bordeaux, but bad in the US. Not good in Champagne actually. But yeah, birth year wines are cool, and an 89 is super cool.
Yeah, it was cool to have
you and Taylor Swift, right?
Yeah, I also I decided last minute to get it, so I had 6 options, which kind of actually made my life easy rather than trying to filter through a lot. But once I found out that it was basically harvested the day after I was born, I was like, all right, this is cool. So that was really fun.
So you have 6 other birth wines in your cellar, or you mean you had the option of?
No, the shops that were around here that had 89, the 1989 wines, there was only 5 options.
Oh, gotcha.
So yeah. But yeah, all of this talk about me, we've buried the lead here. We have Laurence Féraud. I can't always pronounce her last name well, but the key driving force and main family member behind Pegau or Pegau, depending on if we want to be Provençal, that the famous winery in the Southern Rhone, Chateauneuf-du-Pape, today as our guest.
Yeah, I didn't know that I was bad at French and Provençal, or the dialect. Pegau is what I've always said, and that was a cool learning. But yeah, the story of their estate since the 80s, really fascinating. Have a number of firecracker wines that kind of turn the tide, not turn the tide of public opinion as in people used to not like their wines and now they really do, but their Da Capo wine, which they've only made 7 of, and she talks about a good bit, but really catapulted them into the forefront of the way that people talk about Chateauneuf-du-Pape, and all their wines are fantastic. Haven't got to have the Capo, but I hope to in the future.
Yeah. I've actually only been able to have a Côte de Rhône that they make and it was from they have a second label that's like kind of a completely different winery called Chateau Pégau or Pegau, however you want to pronounce it. But yeah, it was really interesting here because their family has been making wine for generations. They've lived in the area. They understand the process, but she was basically saying she wanted to start fresh, make her own winery, take a step away from some of the other things that were going on. So she got a little parcel of family vines and then over time has grown it out. But I really like her approach. The story behind the name was really neat, paying kind of homage to the heritage in the Chateauneuf-du-Pape area. But I definitely learned a lot more about the nuances of making wine in Chateauneuf-du-Pape and the different soil types and their impact on the wines themselves. I think everybody just thinks everything is covered in those big galets stones, and there's a lot more different soil types and nuance to that. So I thought it was really interesting, and it was cool. We got to hear. You get like a firsthand vintage report on Chateauneuf-du-Pape. I know it'll vary producer to producer, but it's cool to kind of get firsthand sense of what the vintage will be like for when it comes out in a couple years.
Yeah, and she'll obviously explain it and give it way more justice than I can, but I appreciated the part of the conversation where she explains to us how they utilize the different vineyards and the blocks from each vineyard, depending on the quality of that year and the yields, and basically which grapes go into which wine in any given year. I thought was fascinating, and also talked a lot about how they age their wines depending on what label they're bottling under, about their massive barriques, 40-something thousand, was it liter barrique? How was it? A very, very large barrels. You can tell me.
I can't remember how many liters.
Like, I don't know the denomination. 40,000 something. I assume liters.
Yeah, it was, and it's the old Foudre style things. I was just laughing or smiling because barriques are a very specific size barrel. So it's if it gets that big, it's no longer a barrique. Which
what do they call it?
A Foudre, I think, is the French word for it. Foudre. It has different names depending on where you are. In Italy, they call them botti, but basically those giant big storage wine or storage barrels. But it was
enough. They have a door. That's not a barrel anymore.
Oh yeah, and it sounded like as someone who had to just clean just tanks in Australia, I can't imagine having to get into one of these barrels and clean them out. But yeah, she talks about that. I thought it was really cool too. She literally had just been picking all day. So to your point about the parcels, she was just coming from tasting around all those parcels, tasting the fruit, came to talk to us, and you could see. We'll get the YouTube up eventually. We have a little backlog on the YouTube videos, but it was like cloudy and windy behind her, and she's all the Mistral's been blowing. So it's cool. You get to hear about like the Chateauneuf-Pape, the heat, but you also get that cold wind that blows down the Rhone Valley, can get up to, she was saying, 60 kilometers an hour. It was basically it felt like you were just in Chateauneuf-du-Pape for a little while when we were having our conversation. It was really fun.
Yeah, you can tell she's the type of person where you could be driving through the region, stop by, and she'd be like dusting off her hands, walking in from the back, and make time to chat with you. It was awesome to spend time, and yeah, learned a lot about Chateauneuf-du-Pape, learned a lot about Pegau, and we hope you guys enjoy it as well. But before we get into the interview, remember, if you're looking to drink more wine from your cellar without worrying about wasting what you can't consume, one of the Coravin systems will be your best friend. You can visit Coravin.com and use code VINT15 for 15% off your purchase of one of their devices. And remember, if you're a member of the trade, visit trade.coravin.com. You can get exclusive discounts on their whole range of products, both for at home and work. And without further ado, here is our interview with Laurence Féraud.
Hi, Laurence. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hello. I'm very pleased to join this podcast today.
Yeah, you're taking time out of the busy harvest season. I know you just had a full day working. Can you actually, before we dive into everything else, can you just let us know how the harvest has been going so far?
It's quite a difficult harvest, many decisions. We need to think about it this year. It's not so easy as usually it is. We have some very variable, probably percentage alcohol we can check in different vineyards. Is why we have to move from a place to another. I look the perfect ripeness, and it's why I said for a week we went quite slow for picking. But this week, we started this Monday with a very hard day. Is why I just finished because of our different time. It was the most suitable for both to speak just after my work. And I have a team with 20 people. And I picking grapes with them as well, because picking grapes for me, it's very important. It's not only work. In fact, it's all, I taste the berries every day and I see how much the taste is better, or maybe another field is even better. So I change and I move my team to a place to another. And this year it's very important about the decision, because the weather was not easy for spring. We had mildew. Then it was not easy to cure the mildew. Then we had a very, very hot summer, very dry. And for the harvest at this time, it's very windy. The mistral blows very, very strong, 100 km/h, and it's quite cold. So we have in the morning 10 degrees Celsius, 14 in the afternoon, which is very, very cool. I never seen a harvest so cool than this year. Cool and cold, I could say. So
Wow.
It's good in a way, but the harvest, they are quite delayed. And anyway, we have to match with nature, and we have to find a way to do the best with the weather.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect kind of segue into talking a little bit about the domain. Could you give us a little bit of like your background within the family, and then tell us a little bit about the domain and how you guys work really, really hand in hand with nature in that?
In fact, the Domaine Pégau was created with my parents, with me and my parents, in 1987. I studied enology, viticulture, and also I did a business school in Paris. I worked in different places, more as a representative for wine and spirits. And once I decided to be back to Chateauneuf-du-Pape village. At that time, I could say late 80s, the village was not so famous as it is today. Of course, Chateauneuf-du-Pape was famous, but mostly with a large estate, but not like we were. My grandparents, they had a small vineyard. My father worked with his brothers and sisters. And when I came back, I didn't want really to work with this large family. Then I asked to my parents if we could create our own business. And my father left the family with 5 hectares, which is half acres. And I wanted to give to that estate another name as different as my last name, because we were too many. Then I call it Pégau. Pégau, or in Provençal pronunciation, or in French pronunciation, it's Pegau. I gave that name because it's connected with the pop period. It's a jug, it's a wine pichet from the 14th century, exactly when the pop they arrived. But this pichet is made with clay, so absolutely not for the pop using, because the pop, they were very rich. The Catholicism was very important in this area. And that wine jug was mostly for the people in the village. They pour the wine with that Pégau. So I picked that name because it was connected with the wine, with the pop period, and is a short name and easy to remember for many people in the world, quite easy to pronounce. Even if you pretend to speak the dialect of Provençal and you say Pégau, it's quite easy as well.
Yeah, we thought that we were speaking French all this time, and we were not. so, uh, so
my parents and I, we started in 1987 with 12 hectares. We built in 1988 and 1989. We built the winery and the cellar. I got from my grandmother a couple of big barrels because we work with a large old cask, so like 45,000 gallon. Only old oak. This oak, they have been used for many, many, many wines. I still have them. That means they probably been used for 90 wines. So it's something crazy. But we are not looking for tannin from the wood, or we are not looking for that oaky taste. We are looking just for very slow oxygenation through the wood. And that gives us smoother tannin when we age the wine in that old cask. So I absolutely always wanted to keep my grandparents' winemaking process. And my father teach me mostly of the pratique, and I study the theory. So both we were very complementary to go in the front. For me, during the early 90s, 92, I started to introduce my wine to different wine critics. But the most important was, of course, the wine advocate. When Robert Parker started to taste the Chateauneuf-du-Pape. So it was in average in the same times, because the wine advocate was created in 1985 and for me 1987. But it took a time for me to really introduce the wine and to really drive the proper wine I wanted to do. And so it's still very traditional winemaking process. And but at that time, it's exactly what the people looked for the Chateauneuf-du-Pape, something very spicy, rich, and Chateauneuf-du-Pape made with 13 different type of grapes, with a full cluster. And this is very interesting. We're still making wine with a full cluster. And today, with a warmer climate, I can notice many other winemakers, they start to be back on the full cluster winemaking process to bring that freshness from the stem. The stem, they bring a little more tannin, but also that contains some greenness, but not too much when the stem is ripe. And by the old oak, we polish all that, and the wine is much more sophisticated. So we kept the same winemaking process. The wine critics, they really like the style. Chateauneuf-du-Pape in all the area became more and more famous in the world. And that really helped all the appellation to really go out from this small village. We are mostly of the time 2,000 people living in Chateauneuf-du-Pape, 280 winemakers, and all of us, we have a different work style in the vineyard, in the winemaking, in the winery, and in the wine aging. And this is very particular to Chateauneuf-du-Pape to have all this range of different flavor and different blend with that 13 type of grapes planted in 4 different soil. At Domaine de Pégau, I have 3 soil. I have a stony soil, sandy soil, and red clay. But I use a 13 type of grapes, but mostly Grenache 80%. At Domaine de Pégau, we produce also red and white. We produce today by all that, could say, success we had during the late 90s that really helped to buy more and more vineyard, Today, we have 23 hectares of Chateauneuf-du-Pape. That means average of 50 acres. We have also in 2012, we bought a new estate called Chateau Pégau, and it's situated 3 miles south of Chateauneuf-du-Pape. Very convenient to work for the Côte-du-Rhône village and Vint de France. So in total, it's 72 hectares, average 160 acres. And we produce 240,000 bottles. 85,000 bottles of Chateauneuf-du-Pape, average 8% of white and the left in red. And we have this red Chateauneuf-du-Pape divided in 2 cuvées every vintage. Probably the domain became much more famous when we created the Cuvée Da Capo. The first one was in 1998. And that was a wine I made from 70% of Lacroix in the sand and 20% of stony soil and 10% of red clay. That blend of soil with 70% Grenache and 30% of all the various type of grapes. That really gave something very smooth, rich, and round power, and it's very sensual as this wine. Only aged 2 years in a large cask, and the domain became famous through that cuvée. Da Capo I pick up this name because Da Capo means to start again, a symphony from the beginning. And we always say Chateauneuf-du-Pape, the wine is made with a symphony of 13 grape varieties. The symphony is because the Grenache is related to a piano. The Syrah is related to the violin. And all the different grapes brings a music in the wine, which is like a concert. And the meaning of Da Capo means to start the music from the beginning. And during the 90s, many people, they wanted to make the wine with more international grape varieties like Syrah. And for me, it's very important to keep our identity. Of course, in a life and even today, there's some fashion ways. People, they like deeper wine. People, they like lighter wine. And that's fashion ways. But that time, they wanted to use more international grapes. But for me, I didn't want to change. I absolutely I was convinced to keep the same winemaking process with traditional grapes varieties. That was really our identity. And it was more important to educate people in the world to appreciate that really typical Chateauneuf-du-Pape, traditional Chateauneuf-du-Pape. Is why I started with the Da Capo, and I did it 8 times. So 98, 2000, 2003, 2007, 2010, 2015, 2016. And my last one is 2020. I don't know, but since 2020, I judge in the vineyard, the grapes are not balanced enough, the taste, to have the level to make a Da Capo. Is why since 2020, there is no Da Capo. I wish maybe in 2025. 2024, I don't think so. But the others are not finished. But no, I don't think so. So 2025, maybe. Why not? But I'm not hurrying. And I'm sure in the life, it's good to live a long time, especially when we enjoy life. And because we know every year is different, every vintage. And it's fantastic when we can pick the perfect grapes with the perfect weather. This is important. So the domain became famous with the Da Capo, and we produce the Da Capo only in a top vintage, as you can understand. The Da Capo is 10% of Chateauneuf-du-Pape production. When we don't do the Da Capo, we have another cuvée called Cuvée Laurence. It's the same wine as Cuvée Réservé. Cuvée Réservé is the label mostly of the people they know in the world. When they know the Domaine de Pégau, they know the Cuvée Réservé. And the Cuvée Réservé has a really, I could say, great level of quality when we make the Da Capo. It's unbelievable. It's very close because everything is good. We have a Cuvée Réservé every vintage. And from the Cuvée Réservé aged 2 years in a barrel, we keep 10% of the Cuvée Réservé to age an extra 2 years. That means 4 years to become the Cuvée Laurence. So every vintage, we can easily extra aging 10% of the Cuvée Réservé to become the Cuvée Laurence. And when we make the Da Capo, we don't make the Cuvée Laurence. So we only have 2 cuvées per vintage. This is important. After, of course, sometimes for the part of experimental, I like to have some micro cuvées, like I have done for my granddaughter, the Cuvée Ella in 2020, which is only 600 bottles. For my parents, I did the Cuvée Paul, P-O-L, for my father Paul, my mother Odette, and me Laurence. It was a comeback of the creation of the domain. So we did it only in 2019. So sometimes I play with some micro cuvée, but most of the time it's the business, and Domaine de Pégau is really famous for the tradition.
Is it when you have so much success with when you release Da Capo, is it hard to maybe not make it in 1 year versus another, to wait such a long time between making the wine because you have so much success with it? Is it a challenge to not want to continue releasing what people are hoping for, expecting?
Yes, it could be difficult, but it's so challenging. When I do some Da Capo, I'm very stressful as well because it's a very heavy responsibility and it's very important. I do the Da Capo when I'm very sure about it. Is why I don't want something average.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, I'm thinking that maybe with across the vineyards, maybe there is 1 block or 2 block where you could make it. Would you make very, very, very small quantity versus like what's the smallest quantity of that wine that you would make if you found maybe 1 block or 2 blocks in the vineyard where you had the right quality?
I don't like to, but except for micro, like I said, micro cuvée for my granddaughter in 2020, but 2020 was a great thing. And 600 bottles doesn't affect the normal cuvée like Cuvée Réservé. But I'm not looking really to do some cuvée when the vintage is good. The vintage could be really, really good. Like 2022, it's beautiful. 2022 could be even like a Da Capo, but I didn't do it. It was not perfect, but I'm very pleased to give a high quality of 2022 Cuvée Réservé. And that make even more confident my customers to buy Pegaux. Specifically at this time, we mustn't go in different way. The people, they want to buy a wine with quality, they need to be secure when they buy something. So this is very important today. And I'm happy with 2022 will be on the market the end of this year. I always bottle the new vintage late November. So late November, that will be the good time for 2022.
And then for all of these, you're saying you've expanded your holdings of vineyard land over the years. Have you implemented your your farming techniques the same way on each of them? Or are you doing like some biodynamic on certain vineyards and more just general sustainability on others? Or how is that?
For we apply the biodynamic only for the white Chateauneuf-du-Pape. For the white Chateauneuf-du-Pape, we have 3 hectares. For the biodynamic, we have the Atempo in white, which is our top white, and we produce only 1,200 bottles per year. And we have the Cuvée Réservé white. We produce 5,000 bottles a year. So this is only what we have in biodynamic. Now, in organic culture, we practice organic culture all over the year, except when the problem is like this year in the spring, we have to spray. In fact, the organic for this vintage in 2024 was really a nightmare during the spring because we couldn't prevent or cure. It was so fast. The mildew was developed so fast by warm and rain, warm and rain. It was really every 8 days we had to be back. And we use, of course, some chemistry product to really cure this. Or I will have non-yield, nothing. So this year was really very difficult for the people. They were in organic culture. I am in organic culture for no insecticide, no weed killers. I use pheromone for insecticide, no spray, only pheromone. I plug the vines, I turn the soil. So we are, I could say 3/4 of the time we are in organic culture, no certification. Because if I have to save my yield, I will do it because that company of Pegau employed 10 people and I need to get the salary out. We need to live. We are 10 family living on it. So for me, also, I don't want any certification because I want that freedom to react. But for the white, on 3 hectares, if I lose a bit of the yield, it's not a big deal for my business because it's only 3 hectares. But for the red, I cannot say to my employees, I cannot pay you. I cannot say to all my clients in the world, sorry, this year I don't have any wine. So it's very, very difficult. It's too much challenging. And I prefer to say, no, I don't want certification. But in my soul, of course, I think it's not a question about certification. For me, it's a question about what we believe, what we want to do. When I eat some vegetables, I prefer to go on the organic vegetables. But of course, sometimes I understand for the vegetables growers, it's not easy and I can buy something else. We have to adapt. By this warmer climate, it's not easy to really manage. It's not warming all the time because this vintage is very cold. The problem is today we have some extreme. So suddenly it's very cold, suddenly it's very warm, suddenly we have too much rain, floods. It's the extreme, the up and down about all that weather. It's impossible to predict and to do our best about it. This is really the problem. But we have to do with it.
Yeah, and I didn't realize before we were preparing for the interview that you made several white wines. When did you, I don't know if you mentioned already, when did you start making your white wines at the Domaine versus the reds?
In 89, my father wanted to make a bit of white, and this white was not especially good. And I remember, but I can't say it because I'm very comfortable to talk and say the truth for me. I remember one wine critic said, but that was during the 80s, 90s. He said, if you go to Chateauneuf-du-Pape, don't forget to go and visit Domaine de Pégau, but please forget is white wine. That was, so when I read it, I said, okay, so that means the white wine is not really good. Step by step, we had because for the white wine, we need a lot of, I could say, engineering, or we need a machine to cool it down. It's not like the red. The red, we can do it as a traditional winemaking process, and we manage it because we know how to manage it. For the white, it was not really, it was just like experiment. So a year was good, a year was not. And we employed, that was 16 years ago, we employed one guy who came from Austria to pick the grapes. And he asked for some job here because he wanted to live in France. Step by step, we tasted together so many different white wine. And to be honest, my palate was very sensitive to the red, but not really to the white. And we learned together how to taste. And once in 2000, he asked me why we don't start to make a biodynamic culture on the white vineyard. And we really need to have everything to cool it down, to control the temperature, everything. So we invest in it. But it was not a big investment because biodynamic culture also is very, very cheap. Like a caron doesn't cost, different herbs of infusion doesn't cost. The most important in the biodynamic is really exactly the time with the moon, how to spray it. So when we started in 2014, it was really for me a discover also about that culture. And we tasted. And really today is exactly 10 years we practice the biodynamic on the white. I've seen a very, very significant difference in the analysis of the white. That means the pH, they are low, the acidity high, the taste of the white is very fine. And of course, in a winery with all the engineering, we really have now a white wine. It's really unbelievable because we have a white wine like a tempo, very high rated by the wine critics. The a tempo, the one I produce only 1,200 to 1,500 bottles a year. This one is, we have only 3 varieties, Clairette, Roussat, and Grenache White. And we have 3 different continents. Concrete egg. The concrete egg for 600 liters, the concrete egg gives some creaminess in this white wine. We also now use some ceramic egg, small one like a barrique. And the ceramic egg, it's very tight. And then we have less exchange with oxygenation, and it's more sharp and straight and a nice tension in the wine, in the white wine. And we use 2 barriques or 1 barrique, it depends. And this barrique, they are already old oak, and that give a touch of nuts. When everything is, the winemaking is made in these 3 different continents, then after we blend. And we have all that complexity in a white a tempo. And a tempo, it's nice because I wanted a pendant with the Da Capo, so a tempo and Da Capo. But a tempo, we can do it every year, every vintage, but really, really small amount. And this white, I love it. Because I love Riesling, I love Chenin, some of the Chardonnay, not all of them, but I love the acidity. So the white a tempo has a very sharp and nice acidity, but also some creaminess and not oxidation, not heavy, absolutely not the Chateauneuf-du-Pape style. I'm sorry because I would like to do a Chateauneuf-du-Pape style in white, but I always wonder, what is the Chateauneuf-du-Pape white style? I don't know. Then we choose with my enologist, but he works in a vineyard. so he's not my enologist, but together we decided to give an orientation to this white to say, okay, this is exactly the white wine we would like to drink in Chateauneuf-du-Pape.
That's really cool. Yeah, kind of leading the way a little bit with the white wine. Do you think about, or I'm sure, have you experimented at all with the red wine in the concrete?
The red wine is only in a concrete vat. We have 150 hectoliter, huge concrete vat, full cluster, concrete vat, but not eggs. They were like a concrete vat they did a long time ago, so they are square.
Like a bath.
Yeah, inside there is a resin epoxy, and we threw the full bunches in it, but they are slightly crushed. So that means the winemaking process is natural and spontaneous, because I picked when of course the juice is sweet. The natural yeast on the skin, they will fermented the sugar, and they will transform into alcohol. Depending the vintage, goes faster or slower, but we don't interfere. That means there's no temperature control for the red. So we also make, not only in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, for the Château Pégaux, the Côte du Rhône, we have Côte du Rhône white, we have Côte du Rhône red, Maclura, we call, and we have Côte du Rhône Village red, we call it Sétier. And also beside, we have some Vin de France as well, Vin de France red. All the red, they are made the same way, with a full cluster.
Is it fairly, when you think, you mentioned early on that everyone in the region has a different way that they go about things in the vineyard and the winery. Is it like, just take the large barriques, like very large casks that you use for the red wines? Is this common at any other domain? How unique are some of these practices that you employ consistently at Pegau to some of your neighbors?
It's complicated. Today, it's quite difficult to find large barrels, secondhand, because we don't want it new. So it's very complicated. Many winemakers, they don't want to use that large one because they cannot find it. When we find a large cask, then it has to be recently empty. It has to be clean. And even if it's clean, before, we have to know which wine was inside. Because all the time, the first wine we'll put in it, there will be an exchange between the wood saturated by the last wine. So it's very important. And a large cask has to move quite fast in my cellar, because if it's slightly standing, I could say 1 month, and it's dry, then it will leak when I will fill it up. So it's always difficult. And also, it's a lot of work, because I have some wooden door, and to open that old wooden door and clean the barrels, close it back. This is really a bit of ancestral. Today, we could buy some barrels with stainless steel door, which is more hermetic. But I have some old barrels, so it's a lot of work. I don't know if really my children, they will like to do it, because yes, it's not easy. Now, also concerning in 2021, I decided to buy for my children another domain in Chateauneuf-du-Pape. But I was on the market, and I asked to my children if they could, we say, give their name to be selected or not to get that vineyard. It's not easy in France and in this area to get some vineyard or new domain. But for the young people, they have the priority. And they ask if, to Le Safer, this organisme, they ask if they could get probably this domain. And in fact, they got the domain, and I bought for them It's Domaine de Rouge, Red Door, Porte Rouge. And they have 4 hectares of Chateauneuf-du-Pape. And they have their own cellar, their own winery as well. And a beautiful building we actually restore. And they work 100% in organic culture. So this is above, even if it's supported by Domaine de Pégau, it's a nice domain.
That's awesome. I didn't know about that one. I know we're getting closer on time here, but I wanted to ask one quick question going back to the soils. Everybody, I think, has the galets stones in their mind when they think about the soils. But it's interesting that you have your 3 different types and 70% comes from the sandy soils. Can you talk about what each type of soil contributes to the wines, or I guess the expression of Grenache and the other varieties that you grow?
Okay. Usually I give some example, or especially because this podcast is for American consumers. Sandy soil in Chateauneuf-du-Pape was Grenache planted. The Grenache expression will be very elegant, very mineral, great length, and that will be more like a Pinot style from Oregon.
Mm.
The Grenache planted in a stony soil will be powerful, rich, and it could be, depend the vintage, even overripe, bit jammy. And that will be more like a Zinfandel or really an extra ripe of the south of California. So this is more the style of the stone, and really Zinfandel we had many years ago in California. Today it's more elegant. And then in the red clay, it's much cooler. And in a red clay, I could compare some of the cab grows in Washington State. A little bit cooler, more straight, and nice acidity. And some others, I don't have some white limestone, but the limestone is quite warm as well, quite rich, but more structured as well. It will be more like a cab, rich cab, but less cooler than on clay, red clay. Warmer.
Yeah, no, that
So
makes
this
a lot
is
of
only for the Grenache. So that means if you have all the different grapes planted only in these 4 different soil, that gives you 1,000 combination of different wine in Chateauneuf-du-Pape blend. So when we talk about Chateauneuf-du-Pape, we never talk about Premier Cru or Grand Cru like many others French area. But Chateauneuf-du-Pape, the consumer has to be curious. He has to go to taste different Chateauneuf-du-Pape to find exactly which one suits him, or which Chateauneuf-du-Pape really likes it. So he has to try many Chateauneuf-du-Pape. This is very important.
So that makes a lot of sense. One question I guess I have following up with that is, it sounds like you drink a lot of wines widely. Are you constantly tasting wines throughout the world, and especially, I guess, in the US to give people a reference point, or are you just doing it because you like tasting wine from all over the world?
I'm tasting wine over the world. I love it. First, I love traveling. I love to meet some different winemakers. I have always something to learn because the wine evolved a lot. I was in South Africa. I was recently in Santorini. And everywhere I travel, I try to meet some winemakers. And after at home, I have many visitors. They give me a bottle of their wine, or they give me a bottle from their wine area. So I have a cellar with many different wines, which I'm always interested to taste something different with my friend. And today it's incredible because the wine, there's all over the world. We have fantastic wine. I was also last November in Yamanashi in Japan. We can see so many different countries. They have really improved in the wine by not only by technique, but by research, by planting a different type of grapes, more adapted to their climate. And also when we are passionate, I think the passion really make the communication easy. It's not only tasting, drinking, it's also some exchange. What did you try? What you have done? What is the result? And really that open our mind. It's very interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Brady, is there anything else that you wanted to ask before we let Laurence go?
This was great. Yeah, I appreciated the overview of the whole domain, the white wines, the red wines. Like I said, I didn't recognize how much a part of the domain white wine was, and also your own interest. It sounds like you guys have done so much to move that forward in the region, create a reference point, which is certainly something I appreciate. So I'll be looking for those wines and hoping that you will make Da Capo in 2025.
I will try. I will try for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Laurence. Have a great day. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you to you. And thank you to all the people they like Pegau. You're welcome at the Domaine. Please come when I'm so busy. I'm so happy to see so many people because after my work, for sure, I travel, but I like when the people, they come to me. So thank you.
All right. That was our interview with Laurence Féraud from Pegau. I hope everybody learned a little bit more about Chateauneuf-du-Pape, learned about the upcoming vintage. And the interview was brought to you by Coravin. If you're like me and you're going to be studying for wine exams, Coravin's the perfect study buddy to help you taste a number of wines and learn the different styles and expressions across different regions. So get a Coravin to help you learn more about wine, whether it's just for fun or for exams. All right. That is our episode for this week. We will be back with another episode next week. Cheers.